In the last video, we made some adjustments to this photograph, and it's definitely looking better, but we actually made those adjustments using the wrong technique. We were using something called destructive editing, and destructive editing is bad because it doesn't allow us to go back and change our mind with the edits we've made. So that brightness and contrast and saturation that we added to this photograph is now burned into our actual image, and if we wanted to undo that contrast, we could go back and try to turn our contrast down and turn our saturation down. We're never going to get back exactly to where we started. And as we add adjustments and try to reverse those adjustments, we're going to degrade the quality of our image. So what we want to do is work in a non-destructive way using adjustment layers instead of just pure adjustments. So let me go ahead and show you how that works. First thing I'm going to do is undo those adjustments we made. And if I hit Command Z, okay, that will undo, the hue saturation that I did. But if I hit Command Z again, it'll actually just keep toggling that hue and saturation on and off. And this can be a little bit confusing when people first jump into Photoshop because that undo works different than it does in Illustrator. Okay, so if I go up to Edit, you can see that hitting Command Z will undo the hue saturation, which is what I want. Okay, so I'll do that. But if I go up and hit Command Z again, you're actually seeing that it's just going to redo and put that hue saturation back. So if I hit Command Z multiple times, it's actually just going to be cycling back and forth between the two states rather than actually going back in time, which is what I want. So what I really want is actually this function called step backwards. Step backwards will allow you to undo multiple times and go back to those previous history states. So in order to do that, I can hit Command and hold down Option and Z, and if I hit that multiple times, then I'm going to undo back to my original state. Okay, you can also do that in the history panel. So if you open the history panel, you can see all of the things that we did here, and these are all the things that I did since I opened it. And if I go up back to the very top, it's actually going to go back to the original state that the photo was in when I opened it originally. Okay, so now that I'm back to the original, I can go ahead and redo those adjustments using non-destructive tools. So last time when we made adjustments to this image, we went up to Image and Adjustments and used these options in this menu. But again, those are the destructive methods. So instead, we're going to go to our Layers panel and use something called Adjustment Layers, which are non-destructive. So currently in our Layers panel, we have the background layer, which is the image itself. And when I go down and click this little circle at the bottom, this circle brings up a menu full of different adjustment layers we can create. And these adjustment layers you'll see are very similar to the options that were in that adjustments menu. So we still have brightness and contrast, we still have levels, we still have hue and saturation. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a levels adjustment layer. And when I do that, you can see there's actually a new layer in the Layers panel. And the way this works is anything that we do to this adjustment is going to apply to all the layers that are underneath it. Okay, so since this levels adjustment is on top of the background, if I make a similar adjustment that I made last time using the actual levels adjustment, okay, so I'm going to do that similar adjustment by bringing the white point in and the black point over, and then the midpoint I'm going to slide a little bit to the left to bring out those shadow detail. Okay, so you can see that that is brightening up the image because this is on top. If I go ahead and move this underneath the background layer, and actually in order to do that, I first have to unlock that layer. Okay, so I'm going to unlock that, and then if I slide this underneath, you can see that the image goes back to how it was before. And that's because, once again, this levels adjustment is only going to apply to things that are underneath it in the layer stack. And since the background is above this adjustment, it's not going to be affected. So once I move it back on top, it's going to be affected once again. And that's the basic way that these adjustment layers work. Okay, so let's create a second adjustment layer for hue and saturation so we can repeat that same adjustment we made last time. And once again, it's going to pop up and I have the adjustment in the properties area. And if I ever want to go back to levels, I can click on this little icon here to make adjustments to that. I'm going to go back to hue and saturation by clicking here. And then again, I get that same menu that I got when I brought up hue saturation in the adjustments menu. and I can bring saturation up just a little bit. Okay, and I can also turn off visibility to these layers. So if I turn off the visibility to the levels adjustment layer, you can see that the photograph goes back to being really dark. If I turn off the adjustment to the hue saturation layer, or excuse me, turn off the visibility, it goes to being kind of that flatter color. Then when I turn them back on, it goes back to being adjusted. So this is why it's called non-destructive, because the original image is still here, but instead of burning in these adjustments to that image and altering that original image, we're instead applying these filters that are coming on top. And these filters can be adjusted at any point. So if for some reason I say, hey, I don't want to do this levels adjustment anymore, I can either just hide the visibility, or I can just even hit delete and delete that layer. And I go back to having the original image exactly how it was before I did any of those adjustments. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command Z to bring that back. And now we're in a much better space. This is the way that you should always be working when you're working in Photoshop.